This Golden Flame is a young adult fantasy novel published in 2021 by Emily Victoria. The sticker on my book says it was originally $24 Canadian, and I bought it for $10 at a used bookstore. I thought it was a little weird for a book to be so new but already in a used bookstore, because it was a couple years ago when I bought it, but I really liked the cover, and I read the back. Now, after completing this, complex investigation, I thought the story had an interesting premise, but as soon as I finished it, I could not stop thinking about it. And my need to write a review that probably no one would ever read was enormous. So I read a lot of reviews online because, people have blogs. I don't have a blog because this is not 2005. So this is a video. Now, one thing I need you to know about the feedback on my essays it was always that half the word count was an unnecessarily long and detailed plot summary. However, no one will be grading this script, so please enjoy my explanation of the plot. It follows two main characters, Karis and Alex. I hope that's how you pronounce her name, and if it's not, that's too damn bad. Anyway, Karis is an orphan who is kidnapped by her country's sort of ruling class of scribes called the Scriptorium, and Alex being an ancient automaton who is over 200 years old. So Karis is singularly obsessed with finding her brother. That's the first thing that she expresses as soon as you start reading the novel. She's trying to find her brother. He was kidnapped as well, but they were separated near the beginning of their service to the Scriptorium, if you will. Alex, for all intents and purposes, is sort of trying to find himself. So the story takes place in a world that is speckled with sleeping automatons. They're these giant, hulking metal monsters that were active more than 200 years ago, until a master of script, which is basically what they call the members of the Scriptorium who mastered the use of the script magic that exists in this world. So Master of Script, Master Theodis, that's what I'm going to call him. In my heart, I want to call him Master Theodotus, but there's no extra syllable, there's no extra words, there's no letters that justify that pronunciation. Just my heart, I feel that it's right. It's spelled Theodis, Theodis. That's what I'm going to call him. So Master Theodis triggered this event called the Great Lapse, and essentially they all shut down. So as I said, this world's governing body is this institution called the Scriptorium, and they've basically been tirelessly studying the automatons ever since the Great Lapse, in hopes that someday they'll figure out a way to turn them all back on. And I guess they abduct children in their free time. So Karis discovers Alex in a cave and wakes him up. A fully intelligent automaton. She finds out that he was actually created by the very same Master Theodis 200 years prior. And he is able to interact with script, the sort of magic that creates runes in the world. Now I'm going to briefly explain the script magic. It's not in my script to explain the script magic, but I'm going to tell you about it. It's basically a system of magic where you write commands, and those commands perform actions based on what they say in the language of runes. I wish I could tell you that it is explained more, but it is not explained more. For example, Karis will write unlock, the rune for unlock, on a door, and it'll unlock that door. But nothing ever says how much effort she has to put into it. They never say whether the magic is drawn from her, from, the earth, from the power of the symbols in themselves. They never put any sort of limitations on who can and cannot use the magic. They just don't say anything else about it at all. No one ever mentions it. I have no idea. They do say it runs on script ink, which is the stuff you use to write. Well, it's not the stuff you use to write, it's the stuff that powers the automatons, but it doesn't seem that important because never do they say that you can't use script magic without, like, the ink. Karis is using it all the time. She doesn't have any ink. But a central part of the plot focuses on her, like, needing the ink to wake up the automatons again, who are made with the script magic, who are controlled by the script magic. I don't know. Okay, anyway. Back to script. So, where was I? So Alex is able to interact with the script, and Kara sees this opportunity to use him to break into the archives on the island where she serves as a sort of, like, scriptorium slave, I'll say slave, and steal her brother's, like, file containing, like, his location, his information. She wants to find out where he is. So once she has it, she leaves the island with Alex and her only friend post-kidnapping named Dane, who currently serves on the same island as a soldier, not like a grunt worker like she sort of is. So the three of them flee in a boat to a nearby island where they encounter a band of pirates. Now, living the sheltered life they have on a single solitary island, neither of them have ever encountered a pirate beyond a few wildly exaggerated 200-year-long coma. Without the most complete of memories is unfortunately not much help either, and all three of them end up kidnapped by pirates. No one's counting, but this does make 2 kidnappings for Karis in her life. So the captain is like your stereotypical spunky, no-nonsense pirate woman named Zara, who immediately identifies herself as like an edgy badass by acting smug and making a lot of threats that she never follows through on. At one point, she has a line that equates to, like, got a problem with that, and I think that she may as well have, like, strong, independent woman written on her forehead in Sharpie. So our heroes slowly transition from prisoners aboard this ship to guests, once she discovers, like, their tragic backstories, and she guesses they're actually okay after all. She has the most interest in Alex, as he is conveniently very good with the script magic, and she's freakishly knowledgeable in that script magic for a supposed pirate. She agrees to take them to their destination, which I have not mentioned up to this point, is the capital city of the world that they're in. I don't remember the world's name, but it's the main city of the world where the magistrate's library is, which is the place her brother is supposed to be, Karis's brother, the magistrate being the leader of the scriptorium and of the country. But Zara does insist on a tiny detour first. She takes Alex, the automaton, to be checked out by an ex-script master, so somebody who ran away from the scriptorium, who's absolutely fascinated by the existence of an intelligent and awake automaton, and this whole mess of, like, ruined runes on his body that might be linked to his loss of memory. So they're in the midst of these, like, very important plot discoveries when, oh no, there's soldiers right outside. Because it turns out that the scriptorium has been pursuing their runaway slaves ever since they escaped the island in hopes of getting them back, I guess. But more importantly, Alex, the only awake automaton in 200 years. How they already know about him, I don't know. But I digress. They escape, after they're safe, Zara sort of reveals to them that she's actually not just a pirate captain, but she's also a scholar of script from another country who's part of an underground rebellion against the scriptorium, along with every member of her 20 people max crew. And she reveals that the magistrate, the leader, has all but given up on waking up automatons, that's the thing they've been working towards. That's the thing they've been researching. They want to wake up the automatons. I don't know why. Defense of the country? From who? I don't know, because it never seems like they run across any foreign intrusion. But that's their goal, waking up the automaton. So she basically tells them he's given up on this, and he has started trying to tattoo runes, such as, like, the command rune to obey, into living people's skin in hopes of making living, obedient human soldiers. For what purpose, it's not clear. Power and subjugation, or the aforementioned defense of the country. against unknown intruders that may or may not be intruding. So several of Zara's crew members actually have these tattoos, so they're like survivors from this whole experiment. They haven't worked yet. They have not actually forced anyone to obey, but the possibility of this magical like command is now a looming threat in the mind of the characters at this point. So one of the reasons that he can't make the automatons work again and that he's given up, Zara says, is that he doesn't have access to script ink, which I mentioned earlier, which they sort of describe as like the special sauce of the magic system. It's used to make and power the automatons, but not to write the script. Script and runes, like the writing of the runes, is independent from this whole script ink idea. So it seems like the ink is only good to act as sort of like the blood of the automatons. So the magic system doesn't need it, but the automatons do need it. So following all of these like pretty horrifying revelations, they set back out for the magistrate's library. They arrive at night, and Zara sneaks them out into the city to the house of a co-conspirator for the rebellion named Calantha. So this woman is an active scriptmaster who's trying to, take down the system from the inside. Upon meeting her, Dane and Alex find out that Karis, Dane, and Alex. Karis, Dane, and Alex find out that Karis's brother, Matthias, who she's been searching for this whole time, the person who drove her to leave the island, is also part of the secret rebellion, and that he was kidnapped by the magistrate 3 days prior to her arrival. And that he's blind and gay. But those traits are never really developed or talked about, so they may not even, they may as well not even exist. So Karis becomes unbelievably jaded upon finding out that her brother is rebelling against something bigger than himself. She cannot believe that he formed any values or attachments during their time apart, and that he did not spend every waking moment searching for her as she did for him. Matthias's boyfriend, Ruddy, I want to call him Ruddy. I think it's Rudy. I don't know how Rudy is spelled. His name is spelled R-U-D-Y. I'm not dyslexic, but I do come across that way. So Rudy tells her that he has heard all about her for years from Matthias, and he tells her basically that no person on earth could love her more than her brother loves her. And he tells her that Matthias is just this most compassionate person he's ever known, and she walks away feeling like a very bad person. So bad, in fact, that she awkwardly leaves Calantha's house to get some distance from the source of her guilt and immediately runs into the magistrate on the streets. Meanwhile, Alex is discovering more about himself and his origins, trying to maybe recover some of his memories. He visits Master Theodis. I want to say Theodis's, but I think that the grammar for that is incorrect. So I think it's just Master I can't do this anymore. Visits Master Theodis home. See, that sounds wrong. Anyway, you get the idea. He goes to his house where he lived before. So it was also his former home and his workshop, because he's a script master. And he regains basically some of the memories of his true purpose and the reason he was built, which is to lock this vessel that holds the country's supply of script ink, which is called the automaton heart. And he's supposed to do this in order to take the power of the script ink away from the magistrate. So he sort of resolves, after some back and forth with himself, that he has to finish what he calls him his father, what his father and his father, Master Theodis, started, and destroy the heart, prevent the magistrate from ever getting his hands on any script ink, should he figure out how to actually open this heart. So he gives his tomb, I've spelled it T-O-M-B, which is wrong. It's T-O-M-E, book. The book that all automatons have, that you can write in to control them. Basically, you write a rune down on the page of their tomb, and they have to follow that command. So should you write, walk forward and spit on the ground in runic symbol, they would have to do that. Anyway, so he gives this book to Karis, and he makes her promise that in the event that they are captured, she will destroy it. Like the classic, oh, kill me so they can't use me for their evil schemes, that type of deal. So Alex, Karis, Dane, Zara, Rudy, and 2 members of Zara's crew sneak into the library way too easily. They also find the heart very easily because, oh no, it was a trap. The magistrate appears, and he hauls with him the driving force of the entire plot, Karis' brother, Matthias. No one saw this coming. So the magistrate uses Karis' brother to force her to write in Alex's tomb and force him against his will to actually activate the automaton heart instead of destroying it or shutting it down, which is what he wanted to do, or locking it. And this act causes Alex to shut down. And the magistrate is able to wake up the largest automaton there is, which has been frozen in the capital city for the last 200 years. They call this one the Colossus. Similar to the Colossus Titan, if you just imagine that inside the walls, the Colossus Titan has been asleep for 200 years, and he's just standing there lifelessly like an unspoken threat. In this, that's exactly what's been happening, and now this big, gigantic automaton is awake. So everyone flees back to Zara's ship, and things look really bad. Karis is racked with guilt, and Alex is all lifeless and asleep, and the magistrate has an all-powerful weapon of mass destruction. So the book concludes after this in very few pages. It's like the ending of a rom-com when everything is fucked and they only have 20 minutes at the end to fix everything. So basically, here's what happens. They use this basically Deus Ex Machina. Zara has a tiny bit of script ink in a little locket, or that she wears around, and they use that to revive Alex. And then Rudy fixes his runes, which restores his full memory. And now he knows how to destroy the heart. So they go to fight the magistrate. Alex gets to the heart. He destroys it, which freezes the Colossus again. Karis and Matthias capture the magistrate, and what follows are 2 additional chapters that wrap things up and describes what all of the characters are off to do now, similar to the end of Legally Blonde, but minus the plot satisfaction. So, a casual 1,300 words in, we're finally ready to talk about my gripes with this book. So, I think this novel reads like a draft. There are so many beats in the story, and there is so little time taken for each one. I think it could have easily been 2 or 3 novels. I find the description to be lacking in a lot of areas. There's points where I can't fully follow the action, or there's scenes that don't take up enough time to the point where you're just unsatisfied. And what I mean by this, by taking up time, is that when you're writing a scene, essentially, the more you write, the more you stretch time. And depending on the intention of the writer, some events can happen very quickly or very slowly. So for example, if I am writing a scene where a character gets stabbed, there's a lot of ways I can go about playing with time. It depends on whether I want it to happen very quickly or whether I want it to feel like it is happening very slowly. So, an example. Jason forced the sword through his brother's stomach. This action takes a second, and that's how it comes across. It comes across very quick. He forced the sword through his brother's stomach. That's it. Next example. Jason watched his brother's face as he held the sword, only pausing for a second before he decisively forced the sword through his brother's stomach. The tip of the solid steel blade sank into his abdomen. Jason heard himself gasp as he buried the blade up to its hilt. So, the literal action of this scene takes the same amount of time, but by adding in more details, I've manipulated the speed at which the action is coming across. It comes across more drawn out. It seems to happen slower. I have stretched time. And then here's one more example. So, Jason watched his brother's face as he held the sword, only pausing for a split second before he decisively forced the sword through his brother's stomach. His hands shook as he drove it through. The tip of the solid steel blade cut easily through the thick fabric of his filthy doublet and sank into his abdomen. Jason heard himself gasp as he buried the blade up to his hilt, and he stumbled forward. The knuckles of his thumb pressed up against the doublet, and it already felt soaked with blood. Jason's stomach churned, and a wave of nausea washed over him. Again, same literal action time, stabs him with the sword. But because of all the small details that I've stuffed into the scene, it's more drawn out. Also, sorry if I pronounced doublet wrong and that took you out of it. Is it doublet? Is it doublet? Is it a French word? I am Canadian. I should know, but I don't know. Anyway, in this Golden Flame, certain beats are sped through without enough detail. It's like the first pass of a scene in a draft where you've not gone through to fill it out yet. It's just bare bones and it's waiting for the second writing pass. I did rewrite a section from towards the end, and I think it really shows off the hidden potential of the novel. So I'm going to read the original scene. It's from chapter 39, pages 359 to 360. This is the original. After all these centuries, all this pain, I finally did it. I can scarcely bear the emotions welling up inside of me, the joy and triumph and relief. It's done. It's finally over. Karis? Karis! Dane's voice filters back to me. It comes again, even more desperate. Alex, I need you. I race back, stumbling around the wreckage, even as the room blurs around me. The Colossus is frozen once again, now that the heart is gone. Its hand has reached down to the ground, fingers curled. Trapped in those fingers is Karis. She isn't moving. Dane's struggling to pry the Colossus's hand open. He looks at me. Panic is in his eyes. Alex, help me, he begs. I run to him, grabbing the automaton's fingers and lifting. My pale metal skin groans beneath... Oh, I added pale there. Whoops. My metal skin groans beneath the weight, but I can't stop. I look down at Karis, who is so still and pale. Crying out, I give one last heave, and the fingers part. Dane grabs Karis beneath the arms and pulls her out. He brushes the hair from her face. Karis? She doesn't respond. I stagger back, panic engulfing me. If only I'd stopped. If only I'd helped. Then Karis. I can't say it. I can't think around the pain that's splitting all over me. Karis's body convulses, and she heaves in a breath, her eyes flying open. She coughs, hacking in air. I sink to my knees as Dane wraps her in his arms, eliciting a strangled yelp from her. She's alive. He slackens his grip. Sorry. Karis struggles to sit up, wrapping her arms around her ribs. She looks at the Colossus, frozen now. Did we win? She manages weakly. Dane buries his face in her hair. Yes, I say. It's done. The heart is gone. Relief spills over her face as we look at each other, both of us on the ground in this broken boathouse, both of us still here. I open my mouth, not sure what I want to say, needing to say something because I almost lost her, when footsteps sound behind us. So that's the original scene. I don't know how many words it is, but it's maybe a page, 2 pages and a half. And then here is my rewrite. I have changed some plot structure to the scene as well as added in details, but this is the rewrite. Here we go. In a moment, it's over. Mere weeks for me, but centuries of struggle for the world. It's almost unfair in that way for everything to end with me, but in another way, it feels utterly right to have finished what I started. The rough petals of gold from the heart lay motionless around me, the ancient script carved into the metal now dark. My knees wobble and a wave of exhaustion washes over me as they give way and I crash down to the floor. My metal knees rip through the wooden planks, and with the walls already in splinters around me, it's all I can do not to laugh. I feel light with relief. I can scarcely feel my own limbs as I allow myself to sink further into the wreckage. It's finally over. Karis? Karis! Dane's voice cuts sharply through the silence. It comes again, even more desperate, shouting, Karis! Dane? I drag myself up, the sharp points of wood scraping my legs. I stumble around the wreckage, heading in the direction of Dane's voice. Alex, please! I urge my tired body to move faster, and when I move beyond a concrete wall that just barely still stands, I come face to face with the hulking form of the Colossus. The Colossus is frozen once again, now that the heart is gone, stilled in a crouch. Even stooped down, the automaton is unbelievably massive. Crouched, the monstrous metal beast still stands as tall as a house, casting a long shadow over the ruined boathouse. I quickly spot Dane's figure kneeling next to the Colossus's ankle. Its giant hand is pressed to the ground, fingers curled. Trapped in those fingers is Karis. She isn't moving. Blood leaks through the metal fingers, dripping from the bronze tips into the dirt. Dane is struggling to pry the Colossus's fingers up. It's okay, he mutters to himself. Just hold on, Karis. My chest feels cold as I kneel next to him and position my hands beneath one of the fingers. My metal skin groans beneath the weight, but I can't stop. My eyes are fixed on the Colossus, warm metal hands splayed against its cold metal. Their identical sheen twists my stomach. I tear my gaze away and focus it on Karis's limp form. Karis, whose tan skin looks deathly pale, whose body looks so small and breakable, whose usually fierce expression is wiped from her face, her sharp features now slack. I push harder. Crying out, I give one last heave, and the fingers part. Dane scrambles to grab Karis as she slips out of the hand, thrusting his arms beneath her knees and lolling head, and pulls her out. He brushes the dark strands of hair from her face. Karis? She doesn't respond. Her cream-colored shirt is soaked red, and as Dane lays her down and begins to pull the fabric back, I sharply jerk my eyes to the ground. I turn and stagger back, my chest heaving, as though my metal insides are grasping at an unnatural mimicry of panicked breaths. I was so singularly focused on the heart only minutes ago. If I'd stopped, if I'd helped, then Karis. I can't think it. My mind won't form the words. The absolute silence of the city presses down on me, and I find that I'm struggling to stay on my feet. The metallic rattle of my chest is deafening, and over it I can just make out the soft sounds of Dane's voice. Alex! Alex! He shouts, and I flinch. Silence settles over us again as I turn back to look at him. Karis is still unmoving on the dirt behind him. Is she, I swallow thickly, alive? Dane nods and motions for me to come over. He takes my hand and guides it to her thin wrist. Dane, I don't think... I start to pull back, but Dane's grip is firm. Alex, you aren't going to hurt her. He presses my fingers to his wrist, and the instant I feel her heartbeat, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I need you to carry her back. My eyes wander down to her torso, where I notice Dane has wrapped his thick jacket over her blood-soaked shirt. Why me? I ask, and his expression tightens. I don't trust my strength right now. Okay, I say softly, and then louder. Show me how to help her. So, dramatic reading concluded. That's my rewrite of that small scene. And I think that it's pretty obvious. I stretched it by, I think it's almost double the length of the original. And essentially, I think that it really shows how much potential the writing has. Like, you can tell that the characters are fleshed out to some degree. You can tell sort of what's going on. But like I said before, the original reads like a draft. It's like the first draft that you wrote and then you haven't gone over again. It's like something you wrote, you finished it, you had it down, and then you sort of set yourself up to come back to it later. It feels just unfinished. So the novel is basically full of sequences like this that just lack sufficient meat. There's very often nothing for you to even pick apart when you read a scene. I find the diction as well is a little juvenile at times, and the basic principle of show, don't tell, as like a core principle of writing, is sometimes not adhered to. Like small pieces of character development end up burdened by like lackluster declarations of emotions instead of descriptions. There's a section on like page 174, quote, "Guilt tears me apart." Small things like that just add to the general unfinished feeling that this book sort of exudes, as if she meant to go back and write what the feeling of guilt tearing you apart is, and just used "guilt tears me apart" as the placeholder. Like, I've done that before when I'm writing. In terms of characters, Karis and Alex are the main characters, and then additionally there's Dane, who I mentioned, Zara, Matthias, Rudy, Calantha, and then some members of Zara's like pirate crew have names: Kocha, Ava, Reska, Finn, Aiken, Het, maybe that's how you pronounce it, and perhaps others that I may have missed. I'm not going to go back and scan it for every single like obscure background character who is named, and I'm not going to be talking about any of the members of the crew. They are just in the background, and generally I don't really have a problem with how they're handled, since they don't have a spotlight on them. There's not anything to critique in regards to like the small background characters. So I'm just going to start with Karis. So the first chapters of the novel are in Karis's point of view, and it's her goal of finding her brother that drives the entire narrative. So she is characterized as like stubborn, adventurous, quite reckless. She'll talk back and like give sass. She refuses to settle down on the island, Talus, this island where she's lived the past 7 years since her kidnapping, since her separation from her brother, and she has observed some script work, despite being an orphan who is relegated to, as I mentioned before, like grunt work only, unlike Dane, who is relegated to like soldier tasks. So she's very taken with Alex from the very first time she wakes him up. She does see him as a tool, but she also explicitly sees him as a person. She's a very stubborn defender of his personhood, to Zara, who accidentally implies that he's only a thing, to several members of her crew, and then to the magistrate eventually. So her whole identity is wrapped up in reuniting with her brother, and when she does, it's like pretty anticlimactic. The scene suffers from the same lack of detail that plagues the rest of the book. Like, Karis as a person has just been utterly unchanged for like the 7 years that she's without her brother, and when she sees him again, what she realizes that he has put down roots. He's carved out a life for himself in the spot that he's ended up, whereas she did everything she could to avoid creating a life, so that when she inevitably left to find him, there'd be nothing to stop her, nothing to tie her down. She sort of feels instantly like slighted upon meeting Matthias's boyfriend and discovering that he's now like deeply entrenched in this entire rebellion against the magistrate. And she allows these feelings to make her impulsive and careless. And when she leaves Calantha's house, that choice, her running into the magistrate outside, sort of starts the domino effect that leads to Calantha's later capture. She later betrays Alex as well in the magistrate's library when they go down. Given the promise of being able to recover her brother, she repeatedly expresses that she does not care about the rebel cause. She only cares about her brother. She does all of the terrible things that she does because she just has tunnel vision for her brother. Now, one of the big problems with this is that her choices don't have consequences. Like, Alex is revived by Zara's Deus Ex Machina locket full of script ink, and he forgives her. Nothing bad actually happens to Calantha after she's captured. She does get her brother back. The magistrate stays winning for all of 10 minutes before the whole gang swoops in to kick his ass. What convinces her to fight for something bigger than herself is just like this stern talking to she gets from her brother, and like the unbearable weight of shame from the guilt she feels at betraying Alex, who trusted her so deeply. Like, the conviction that she has later in her fight against the magistrate does not feel earnest. She literally asserts to him that she would happily die to bring him down, which comes completely out of left field, and I am not convinced that this like vitriol has its roots in how bad she felt that she fucked up. On another note about her reunion with her brother, I also think that was way too smooth. Like, her entire identity for 7 years, she's completely absorbed in it. And it's just finding her brother, no matter what. And when she finds out that her level of obsession is not reciprocated, whether it's warranted or not, her entire world should come crumbling down. She should be so irrationally pissed at her brother. It should be such a shocking event for her character. But instead, she doesn't even really bring it up to him when she talks to him. Like, she gets mad in her head, she does something stupid, she goes outside at Calantha's house, she runs to the magistrate, but then she sort of just gets over it. And when she speaks to him, everything seems totally fine, totally perfect. It's like she's just so overwhelmed with the relief of being able to speak to him finally that everything else becomes like a moot point. Another key part of her character is her portrayal as being aro ace, or maybe just ace and potentially aromantic. So that was a huge shock to me when I finished reading it. This is something I found out from reading the reviews, as someone who actually, read the book, and also somebody who is asexual. So I'm reading this review of the book written by somebody else, and it mentions a small amount of praise for the author's wonderful portrayal of an asexual character, to which I thought to myself, oh, who was it? I didn't pick up on any asexual aspects to her character at all. To me, two things sort of logically explain her lack of a romantic partner. She doesn't have a romantic interest in the book. There's no romance for her, no romance between her and anyone else, also no romance between Alex and anyone else. So essentially two things I thought that explain this. So given the all-encompassing search for her brother, there seems to be a perfectly good reason for her not to engage with anyone. Like I mentioned earlier, she's trying to avoid putting down roots. Secondly, the only people available to her are Dane and Alex. And Dane is not interested in Karis. He actually ends up with Zara. And then Alex is not an option because he is a robot. So there's small segments when she comments on how desirable Dane was to girls back on Talos, their island. But she doesn't explicitly say that she is interested in him. To which I would say that is not adequate development in itself. It's easy to not be interested in one boy. There is a moment where she's watching Dane and Zara, and here's a quote from that, page 277. For the briefest moment, I wish I could have something like that, a relationship that's as close as that, where I don't need words to explain what I'm feeling. And then a few lines down, it carries on, quote, I might not have what Dane and Zara do, but that doesn't mean what I have is weaker. So these small moments do not convey any idea of orientation to me. It just seems like she doesn't have time for romance, or that there isn't anyone around who matches with her. If anything, her lack of romantic partner makes her seem a lot younger than she is, even combined with some of the juvenile language earlier on. I actually thought she was 14, 15 tops. I think she's supposed to be 17. I don't know her exact age, but I think she's supposed to be much older than she comes across. Basically, the whole thing just feels like she does want someone, doesn't have anyone, and that she's okay with that for now. Something else I noticed while I read is that the plot really wants you to think that Karis is more important than she is. The magistrate knows her name and he monologues about reading up on her and anticipating her arrival when they first break into the library. She's also the linchpin who drives the plot and the one who discovers Alex, in the cave at the beginning. she gives off the energy of a side character who has somehow landed a narrator role. Like, it's like a Great Gatsby level portrayal. She is Nick. I think it's kind of insane for the magistrate to know who she is. Like, in the context of the world, she is a nobody. She's just like some orphan that got picked off the street by the scriptorium to do like grunt work for them. There would be no reason for the magistrate to know who she is, let alone care about her or find her threatening in any type of way. She only even joined the whole rebellion maybe like 2 days maximum before running into him for the very first time. And she runs into him for the very first time outside of Calantha's house, which is not even a point at which she has actually agreed to join the rebellion. She's just sort of forced into the environment of, hey, it seems I'm in the rebellion now. It's not really something she chooses until later when she really chooses it. Meanwhile, there's characters like Zara or Matthias who have been actively working towards the downfall of this man for years, and they are less acknowledged by him. It all feels like completely upside down. In terms of her driving the plot, I think that having a nobody as your main character can definitely work, and there are lots of examples of plots where the main character is just totally unimportant within the context of their world, but I think that you have to be really aware of it as the writer. I think one of the examples that I could give is Rogue One. So Rogue One is a truly like excellent movie where all the characters are just nobodies. They come from nothing, they're virtual cannon fodder, and they are barely given a footnote in the overarching plot of the first Star Wars movies. I actually thought Rogue One was just another attempt by Disney to milk the Star Wars titty dry, but instead I found it to be just like unbelievably tragic and captivating. The characters are compelling, and despite their like seemingly small contribution to the cause at the time, their like tiny actions have this huge upwards ripple effect through the entire series. Yet nobody remembers them, no one knows their name. The movie is just this very brief moment that you get to spend with them, where you put a name to the unsung heroes, and then it's over. Part of their charm is their dedication and just massive achievements in a world that does not acknowledge them at all. They know they're such like tiny pieces of the puzzle, and they really own it. They aren't over bragged about or overexposed. All in all, I find Karis to be slightly annoying and an unsympathetic character. Her growth feels really undeserved and like unsatisfying at the end because she does nothing to earn it, and she reaps no consequences from any of her actions. So, moving on to the second main character, Alex. Just to preface this section, Alex refers to his creator, Master Theodos, as his father, so I'm just going to use those two terms interchangeably. I actually have very few complaints about Alex as a character. He's confused at the beginning, he struggles with like his missing memories, and this unfathomable idea that he's been asleep for over 200 years. He's just utterly, completely alone in this like huge, expansive world. He's no compass. On the other hand, he's woken up by Karis, someone who is so filled with purpose that it's practically like leaking out of her pores, and he's just immediately attached to her. She basically tells him to get a fucking move on because she has places to be, and he obliges. He just follows her around because there's nothing else for him to do at the time, and while he journeys with her, he has all these fleeting memories of his creator that are just a dead end because he's missing this big chunk of memories, and he's frustrated. Despite this like frustration and these dead ends, he's compassionate, he's inquisitive, and he's very protective of Karis, which makes sense as she's the only like first person aside from his creator to see him and to be kind to him. Something he struggles with as soon as they encounter like Zara and her crew is his identity as an intelligent automaton. Because all of the other automatons are mindless. They're just robots. They have no will, they have no thoughts. nothing. He is the only one who is actually autonomous. See, the thing is, he feels like a person, but physically is a robot. He was created to serve someone else's purpose, complete with this tomb, this book, that can control him and completely strip him of his autonomy. So 200 years prior to this, he never encountered anyone outside of his creator, so he didn't deal with this problem. But now that he's in the world, he has to deal with the reality of the way other people perceive him, which is as a thing and not as a person. So one of his reoccurring fears across the novel is that somebody will take away his autonomy and he'll be forced to act against his will. And that fear is actually realized when Karis writes in his tomb and forces him to activate the automaton heart, which allows the magistrate to use the Colossus automaton again. And this is like an earth-shattering betrayal from Alex's point of view. Since he woke up, Karis has just been the new center of his world, and someone who made it very clear to him that he could trust her no matter what. She supported him, she defended his personhood, she promised him that she would not let him be used against his will, and then she just utterly violates their entire relationship by taking away his autonomy. So in the end, Alex actually wants to fulfill the purpose that his father crafted him for, and the completion of his journey is very satisfying. He destroys the heart. He feels all the euphoria of not only the completion of this task, but the memory of his purpose, the memory that this was the task that he set out to complete. When I read Alex's chapters, he feels like the only character that actually got the time they needed in order to complete their whole arc, or the arc that was envisioned for him. He's not rushed. His scenes feel more raw and real. He's more developed. He's probably my second favorite character. We will get to my first favorite character after we talk about Dane. So, Dane. He's Karis's best friend. He's like the third musketeer here. Best friend on Talos, which is the island. And to reiterate, she spends 7 years on Talos doing grunt work after being separated from her brother. And Dane is somebody that she meets while she's there. And he's also kidnapped. He's just like a victim exactly the same way that she is, except instead of doing grunt work on the island, he is a soldier. He's fulfilling a soldier role. So I think there's so much wasted potential with Dane. I really like him, but he feels really, really cast to the side. I get that he's not the main character. He is a side character, but he's just completely overlooked. He's overlooked to a degree beyond just a side character. And I don't know if it's meant to feel that way, because this is usually from sometimes Alex's POV, but from Karis's point of view. And her focus is elsewhere. So back on Talos, as I mentioned, Dane is a soldier. And he, unlike Karis, who doesn't put down any roots, he does put down roots. He has friends, he has a life, and he leaves all of it to go with Karis when she leaves to find her brother. Now, here's the thing. I understand that Dane was basically one step above, slave on Talos. He basically was a slave. He was just in soldier role and not in servant role. So his situation was no different from Karis's, except for where she has aspirations to leave the island, he has no aspirations beyond the island. So he formed connections. He settled down. It does make some amount of sense for him to want to escape. But honestly, it feels like there's more for him on the island than off the island. He probably has friends, he has this job, and when he leaves with Karis, he spends the rest of their journey missing his station as a soldier, and Karis constantly is left feeling guilty about dragging Dane away from the island and sort of rendering him purposeless, although she never actually considers the whole, deeply considers the whole freeing him from servitude angle. So he is almost instantly drawn to this pirate captain as soon as they meet her, Zara. who pins him as a soldier the second she sees him, because I think that he's wearing like the clothes of a scriptorium soldier. So that's how she identifies him right away, and she sort of coins the nickname Soldier Boy like right away, and essentially does not address him using another name for the rest of the novel. So his whole identity is wrapped up in being a soldier, from the way he is perceived by others to the guilt that Karis feels at pulling him out of that job. We never get anything from his point of view, but he does express in like a few conversations with Karis that he is in the midst of like this identity crisis now that he's no longer in his station as a soldier, despite the fact that he was really more of a slave than a soldier, like a slave soldier. But that's not brought up at all, really. So by the end of the novel, he sort of found this new thing to attach his identity and purpose to, which is Zara, and this new like life he wants aboard her ship as like a pirate, even though I don't know that they're really pirates, and they're honestly more like rebels. But pirate, rebel, this is his new plan. He wants to be with Zara. He wants to sail aboard her ship as a pirate/rebel. So to me, this characterization is a little shallow. So the total depth of his character is just that his identity is tied to one thing. He loses it. He is like sad for a little bit, and then he finds something new to tie himself to. He doesn't express any type of ambition. He's very loyal, very reliable, but like not much else. He doesn't have a background or anything else. On an unrelated note, I find that his relationship with Zara also blooms just like mostly off screen or off page, I guess. So he has really no development and doesn't change at all. He seems like just as happy to be traveling freely with Zara as he was when he was an enslaved soldier. So this brings me to my favorite character, which is Matthias. And I just like him because I think that the concept of his character is so incredibly cool and just like completely underutilized. So he's Karis's brother, right? Main character's brother. And as I've sort of described already, instead of dedicating the past 7 years to relentlessly searching for her as she was searching for him, he wound up a prisoner in the magistrate's library. And following that experience, he was like fueled with this burning passion to fight against the magistrate and against the institution of the scriptorium, and he ends up joining the rebellion. And he is infamous as the Bandit, which is like a title that's brought up throughout the novel, as belonging to this character who just causes all sorts of issues for the magistrate and is like a beacon for the rebellion. It's called the Bandit. So essentially, he's got wanted posters strung up of him as well throughout the main city. Another thing about him is that he is near blind, and despite this like hindrance to him, he's just totally unwavering in his determination. He has a very cool boyfriend, Rudy, who's actually a scholar currently in the scriptorium. So basically, blind gay bandit. And I want to read a novel about his life. His capture and torture, like his drive to fight for the rebels, his relationship with Rudy, the struggle of feeling like blind and potentially worthless in his task as a bandit for the rebellion because of it, and his struggle maybe to overcome this feeling of like physical uselessness, and still find a way that he can use skills that he does have and be helpful to this cause that he's so dedicated to. Instead, what I get with him is like 20 pages where he is mostly just a warm body to comfort Karis after she betrays Alex and to tell her that it's okay and that she did nothing wrong. I would love a novel about Matthias, but that potentially is just like my bias, because Matthias is more interesting to me as a character than anyone else. I do think that Karis has potential, and I do think she wasn't given enough time but as well that she is just, unsympathetic, madly annoying. I don't exactly find a lot of similarities between characters that I do love and Matthias, like Nova from the Renegade series that Marissa Meyer wrote, Nemesis in The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid, Ren in Bonesmith. Bonesmith was another one that I really liked and really enjoyed. So these characters are all passionate, emotionally complex, coincidentally female, and the journeys that they go through in their respective stories are super life-changing, brutal. Those are the similar qualities I find to Matthias. The most similar character I can think of to Matthias demographically would be Tio from the Sunbearer Trials, but they're only demographically similar, not similar in personality. The point here is sort of that just Matthias is a complex character, and his potential is just wasted because he doesn't get any time in the novel. So another thing to bring up, post characters, is the obey tattoos that I mentioned at the beginning. I mentioned at the beginning, sort of near the beginning, that the magistrate wants to tattoo this obey command into people's skin because he has given up on trying to revive the automatons. So I think that these tattoos are just the coolest and also the most underused plot devices in the entire novel. There is a tonal shift when Karis and the others learn about the tattoos, when Zara reveals the real atrocities that go down in the magistrate's library. They bring this dangerous tension to the story. They're another variable that could come into play at seemingly any time and just change the course of the story. And I was holding my breath for the moment that Matthias's tattoo would blaze to life and he would be forced to fight the protagonists against his own will, sort of like a living marionette. Or a cliffhanger where the heroes are winning and then the entire battle changes when half of Zara's crew is just magically turned against them. And these things did not happen. Chekhov's gun never went off, and I spent the entire novel just bracing for the impact. For the tattoos to never come into play, they may as well have not existed at all. They're worthless. Why even bring them up? To have this fascinating plot device left on the table is so disappointing, and I think that everything else, it just comes down to a lack of time. To fully build out the idea of the obey tattoos would take a lot of additional content to the book, and it just isn't there. I also want to mention briefly the magistrate. I wrote the section on him after the tattoos, and I meant to write it with the rest of the characters, but I didn't do that. And I also didn't switch where they were after realizing that I didn't do it. So here's how we're running it. So basically, he's the villain, head honcho, top of the aristocracy, main symbol of the, of the institution. He is the imposing threat on the world. He represents the system. If only all systems were this easy to take down. He's supposedly someone so powerful and viciously cruel that he tattooed the command to obey on innocent prisoners countless times in an attempt to turn them into living soldiers. His reputation, I am told, is terrifying. He, however, is not terrifying. Karis meets him for the first time, as mentioned, storming out of Calantha's house, and he comes across as just a sweet old man. When I read it for the first time, he was new and intriguing and mysterious, and I wanted to learn more about him, but there is nothing else to learn about him. He wants to build an army, he's doing despicable things, but why? I don't know. He has no goals that I can surmise. He wants all this power, he wants the automatons, but he's not given a reason beyond the shallowest explanation of he is evil. His library, empty. No guards with names or children or why, no wife. He has no apprentice. He has, like, nothing. He has no one to hang out with. It's just him alone with some, like, nameless bodyguards. And he is defeated so easily. Like, after Alex destroys the heart and Kara states that they must hunt down the magistrate because, quote, as long as that man is out there, none of us will ever be safe. Quote from the book. But this is really empty and cringy because he actually does not show himself to be dangerous. He was not threatening when the heart was intact, less so now that it's destroyed. They corner him, and Matthias just, like, walks up and grabs him with, like, a bit of direction from Karis. And that's it. And then the fight concludes. And all I'm thinking is, thank goodness that this monster is going to be behind bars. Or not. But maybe he will be, because the last we hear about him is that he will get a trial. And then they never mention him again. So, essentially, every problem in this book boils down to a lack of time. Not enough time taken up by a scene, not enough time to fully implement a plot device, wasted potentials and characters who could have blossomed if only they had had more time. Now, I understand I'm going really hard against this book, and it may seem like I didn't like it, but that is not actually the case. My heart aches for this story because it is so good. It is packed with such great ideas, and there's so many places where I stopped reading as I was going through it, just out of frustration at the lack of follow-through. Like, it took me so long to finish this novel because I was so bored, and I wish that the characters and story could have been more fleshed out. Unfortunately, to me, this is a draft. It's an unfinished draft for, like, a trilogy. I don't know what the limitations on the novel were, if it was deadlines, if it was inexperience or writer's block or, like, contract obligations. I don't know the ins and outs of the literary business, but whatever it was, something took the time away from this novel and just robbed it of the development and just from the thoughtfulness that it needed to just flourish as a story. But overall, it was not bad.